Have you ever wondered what it feels like to finally find love, only to have the people you trusted most try to tear it apart? Nayla Bennett had spent her whole life trying to be enough for a mother who never hugged her, a sister who never stopped criticizing her, and an aunt who believed love was a transaction. When she finally found someone who saw her for who she truly was, a man who didn't want to change her, but simply love her, she thought she had finally made it. But on the morning of her wedding, everything fell apart. Vendors disappeared. Her dress was ruined. The silence of betrayal from her own family grew louder than any "I do." If you were in her shoes, standing in a torn gown, dreams unraveling by the minute, what would you do? Would you give up? Or would you rise? This is not just a story about a wedding. It's about choosing your own worth when the people closest to you refuse to. So take a breath, lean in, and let your heart feel this one. If this story touches something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Now, let's begin. The morning light slanted through the blinds, casting long, thin stripes across the pale carpet. A faint breeze stirred the lace curtains. The room was quiet, too quiet. On the bed, a wedding dress lay crumpled like a ghost of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The hem was torn. A red stain bloomed across the bodice like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed again. Another vendor, another cancellation. Nayla Bennett sat on the edge of her bed in her pajamas, her hair unbrushed, her hands trembling. This was not how it was supposed to be. This was supposed to be the day she stepped into her dream, a day of love, promise, and new beginnings. Instead, she sat alone, surrounded by the wreckage of a day her own family had quietly, meticulously destroyed. But before we go there, let me take you back to where it all began. She was never the kind of girl people noticed. Nayla grew up in a small town in Vermont where folks knew your grandmother's maiden name and what your father drank when he came home from the mill. Her mother, Linda, worked double shifts at a laundromat and rarely smiled. Her older sister, Jessica, had a sharp tongue and a gaze that always seemed to carry disappointment. And then there was Aunt Patricia, who had a comment for everything and kindness for almost nothing. They lived in a cramped two-bedroom duplex off Maple Street. The carpet smelled faintly of old coffee and dust. On cold nights, Neela could hear the neighbors arguing through the walls, their voices blurred like a forgotten radio station. They never had much, but Neela had one thing that kept her going, the dream of something more, a quiet life, a kind partner, maybe a little house with a porch swing and hydrangeas by the fence. She worked at a modest coffee shop on Main Street, a narrow storefront with creaky wooden floors and an old bell above the door that jingled every time someone came in. She liked the rhythm of it, the hiss of steamed milk, the quiet clink of cups, the hum of conversation from regulars who told her about their grandkids, their surgeries, or the fish they almost caught last weekend. No, most days, she kept her head down. She knew how the world saw her plain, polite, invisible. And that was fine. She wasn't trying to be the center of anything. But there were days, those soft gray days, when the clouds hung low and the air felt thick with waiting, when Neela wondered if her life would ever truly begin. Then, one Tuesday morning in early spring, he walked in. He wasn't striking, not in the way that movie stars are. He wore a simple gray jacket, jeans that had seen better days, and scuffed brown boots. His shoulders slumped like he hadn't slept in weeks. But his eyes were kind. There was something in them that made her pause. "Black coffee, please," he said. His voice was soft, slightly husky, like he wasn't used to speaking more than he needed to. As she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed, just barely, but she felt it a quiet, electric warmth. "Thanks, Nayla," he said, glancing at her name tag. He said her name like it meant something, like he'd known it long before he ever walked through that door. After that, he came in every morning. At first, their exchanges were brief. Weather, books, small talk. But slowly, like honey seeping through the cracks, their conversations deepened. He told her he worked in investments, though he never bragged. He read poetry, loved classic films, and always tipped well without making a show of it. His name was Ethan Whitmore, and for a long time, Neela had no idea he was wealthy. He wore flannel shirts and drove an old Chevy pickup. He didn't wear a watch that cost more than her rent or talk about ski resorts in Aspen. He asked about her life, her dreams. He listened, really listened. And Neela, careful, quiet Neela, found herself opening up in ways she never had. She told him about her mother's silence, Jessica's biting remarks, and how she used to pretend her bedsheet was a wedding gown when she was little. He didn't flinch. He didn't pity. He just nodded, held her gaze, and stayed. There was a softness to him, beneath the exhaustion, a steadiness, and when he finally asked her out over a half laugh and a crooked smile, she almost said no. What could a girl like her offer a man like him? But something in his voice, the gentle hope, made her say yes. Their first date was at a small Italian diner on the edge of town. He held the door open, pulled out her chair, talked about the way garlic reminds him of Sunday dinners with his grandfather. She laughed more that night than she had in years. He didn't try to impress her. He made her feel seen. That night, after he dropped her off, and she sat on her porch in the chill spring air, Neela closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "Maybe, just maybe, this is what good feels like." She didn't know then that this love, this quiet, steady, deeply real love, would soon be tested in the cruelest way, and that the people she called family would be the ones to try and tear it all apart. Spring crept slowly into Vermont that year, as if unsure whether it was welcome. The air carried a damp sweetness, a mix of melting snow and blooming dogwood trees. The days stretched longer, and the sunlight lingered on the pavement outside the coffee shop just a bit more each evening. Ethan Whitmore kept coming, each morning, just after 7 or, Mim? He'd walk through the door of Maple Roast Cafe, nod at the old couple in the corner booth, and order the same thing, a black coffee, no cream, no sugar. And each morning, Nayla Bennett found herself hoping he'd stay just a few minutes longer. Sometimes he did. They talked about nothing and everything, books they'd both read, the way coffee always tasted better on rainy mornings, how silence, when shared with the right person, didn't feel empty. He asked about her favorite music, and when she shyly admitted she still listened to 70s folk rock, his eyes lit up. Joni Mitchell or James Taylor, he asked. She smiled. Both. And Cat Stevens when I'm feeling nostalgic. He told her about his childhood summers on a lake in New Hampshire, how he learned to skip stones and sleep under the stars. He never mentioned yachts or European getaways. He spoke with a fondness that made those memories feel like something warm and close, something that could belong to anyone. That was Ethan. Nothing about him said billionaire. Everything about him said real. Nayla started noticing the little things. The way he never looked at his phone while talking to her. How he remembered her favorite flower lilacs and once brought a single sprig wrapped in a napkin. He was attentive without being overbearing, kind, but never pitying, and most of all, he made her feel like she mattered. It terrified her. One Tuesday, as she was wiping down the counter and pretending not to watch the clock, Ethan lingered by the pastry case longer than usual. He looked nervous. "Hey, Nyla." She turned. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know this might sound forward, and I swear I'm not trying to make it weird. But would you want to have dinner with me sometime for a split second?" She froze. She could hear her sister's voice in her head. Guys like that don't date girls who serve coffee. But Ethan wasn't just a guy. He was someone who saw her, who listened, who never once made her feel less than. She looked at his face, hopeful, vulnerable, and surprised herself by saying, "I'd like that." They had dinner that Friday at a tiny Italian place just off Main Street. The lights were soft, the wine inexpensive, but warm. Ethan asked questions like he genuinely wanted to know her, not just the facts, but the spaces in between. He asked about her favorite childhood memory. She told him about the time she won a school art contest and her mom actually showed up to the ceremony. She didn't smile, Neela said, but she clapped. Once. That was enough. He didn't laugh. He didn't rush in with advice or apologies. He just reached across the table, gently brushed his fingers against hers, and said, "That must have meant the world." It did. And so did that moment. Over the weeks that followed, their connection deepened, not in grand gestures, but in quiet rituals. Ethan started leaving her handwritten notes tucked into her tip jar. She began baking muffins at home just to bring him a fresh one each morning. They shared playlists, walked aimlessly through old bookstores, watched thunderstorms from his porch in silence. But Neela still struggled. Each time Ethan did something kind, offered to drive her home in the rain, left a single daffodil on her front steps, her heart swelled, then whispered, "You don't belong in his world." She hadn't told her family yet. She wasn't sure she could. Her mother barely noticed when Nyla came home later than usual. Jessica, on the rare evenings she visited, always made sarcastic remarks about your mysterious coffee customer. Aunt Patricia had once warned her that men like that only cared about appearances and that Neela didn't have much to show. So Neela kept her happiness quiet, like a candle she shielded with both hands. One night, they sat on a park bench under a blanket of stars. Neela had her knees pulled to her chest, and Ethan had draped his coat over her shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Anything?" "Why me?" Ethan turned to her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. I don't have much. I'm not." She hesitated. "I'm not like the women I imagine you've dated before." There was a long pause before he spoke. Not awkward, just full. "You ever meet someone," he said, "and just know they see you, not the job, or the family name, or the bank account. Just you. She nodded slowly. That's what I see when I'm with you. Nyla, I'm not trying to save you. I just want to be near you. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. No one had ever said something like that to her, not without a catch. That night, when he kissed her for the first time, it wasn't fireworks or sweeping music. It was gentle, sure, and so full of meaning it made her chest ache. In that moment, Neela felt something she hadn't in a long, long time. Safe. She didn't know yet that the safety she felt would soon be threatened not by strangers, but by the very people who shared her blood. And the deeper she fell into love, the more tangled the strings of guilt and fear became. Because in the Bennett family, happiness was often met with suspicion, and Neela was about to learn that some people, especially those closest to you, don't always celebrate when you rise. It was a Sunday evening in late June, one of those golden Vermont nights when the sun lingered on the horizon like it wasn't quite ready to say goodbye. The air was soft with the scent of pine and grilled corn from someone's backyard barbecue. Neela had just finished washing the last of the dishes when Ethan, unusually quiet, stood in the doorway of her tiny kitchen. He held something in his hand, a small, velvet box. Her breath caught before he even said a word. "Come sit," he said gently, patting the couch they'd found at a thrift store for $20. She sat, her hands still damp, a tea towel crumpled in her lap. Ethan knelt before her. No grand speech, no candlelit restaurant or string quartet. Just the two of them in a modest apartment that smelled faintly of lemon soap and old wood. "Neela," he said, his voice steady but soft, "you make me want to be better every day. You remind me who I really am. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled instantly, not because the ring sparkled it did, but because of what it meant. He saw her. He chose her. She nodded, unable to speak, and threw her arms around him. For a few perfect seconds, the world shrank to the space between their heartbeats. The next morning, with her hands still trembling from the night before, Neela called her mother. "Mom," she said, breathless, "I have some news." There was a pause so long, Nyla thought the call had dropped. Then Linda's voice came through, flat and low. A billionaire Neela blinked. "What, Ethan? He's not just some guy with a decent job. He's loaded. That's what Jessica told me. Are you sure this isn't some kind of joke?" Nyla's heart sank. "It's not a joke. Mom, he loves me. I love him." Another pause. "Well," her mother muttered, "I just hope you know what you're doing." Jessica's response came later that afternoon in the form of a text, LOL. "Rich guys don't marry girls like us, but hey, enjoy the ride." Neela stared at the message for a long time. There was no congratulations, no heart emoji, just cynicism wrapped in a snide joke. Aunt Patricia, when she finally heard the news over coffee at Linda's, was the bluntest of them all. "Honey," she said, setting down her mug with a sharp clink, "men with money don't marry women without options unless there's something they're getting in return. What did you do to get that ring?" Neela felt like she'd been slapped. She didn't answer. She didn't cry. But that night, when she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a quiet unease stirred in her chest. What if they were right? Ethan noticed almost immediately. "You've gone quiet," he said one evening as they walked hand in hand by the lake. "What's going on?" She hesitated. "I just told my family." His brow furrowed. "And they don't understand. They think it's strange that someone like you would want someone like me." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Nyla," he said, gently but firmly, "do you think it's strange?" She didn't answer right away, because somewhere, deep down, a sliver of doubt had begun to grow. As the wedding planning began, so did the tension. Ethan, ever thoughtful, insisted on covering the costs. "I want this to be your dream," he told her one night, their fingers entwined on the couch. "Whatever you want, wherever you want it." At first, Neela was overwhelmed by his generosity. She imagined a small garden ceremony, soft music, lilac bouquets, and a modest dinner with people who mattered. But when she shared this vision with her mother and sister, the reaction was immediate and sharp. "A garden?" Linda scoffed. "Sweetheart, if he's paying, why not go big country club? Crystal chandeliers. Make it count." Jessica chimed in with her usual smirk. "Yeah, don't waste this golden ticket on mason jars and fairy lights." Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the noise. "You want people thinking he married some barefoot waitress. You need elegance, prestige." Each planning session became a quiet war. Neela wanted simplicity. They demanded extravagance. When she suggested white roses, they insisted on orchids. When she chose a classic lace gown, Jessica wrinkled her nose. "That makes you look poor." When she picked a modest menu, Linda frowned. "People will think he's cheap." It wasn't about her anymore. It was about image, about what they could show the world. And through it all, Nayla felt herself slipping, losing the dream she had once clung to, piece by piece. She tried to talk to Ethan about it. "They're overwhelming," she said one night, her voice tight. He brushed her hair back from her face. "We can do whatever you want. Nyla, you don't owe anyone a show." "I know," she whispered. They're my family." Ethan nodded. "But do they make you feel loved?" It was such a simple question, and yet she couldn't answer it. Not with any honesty. One evening, after yet another exhausting group meeting about table linens and guest lists, Neela sat alone in her car outside the coffee shop. She watched the rain bead on the windshield and tried not to cry. She remembered the way Ethan looked at her that first day, the way he said her name, and she wondered, not for the first time, if she was slowly becoming invisible again, but this time in her own story. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that her family had already started planning something far beyond opinions and flower choices. Something that would shatter more than just her vision of a wedding. And Ethan, quietly watching from the edges, had begun preparing for what he feared was coming. The engagement announcement went out with a simple photo, Ethan holding Nyla's hand as she laughed, her eyes half closed in mid-smile. It was taken on the porch swing he'd installed himself on her little rented home. To Nyla, the photo captured something real joy without pretense. To her family, it was a marketing opportunity. "This is the time to show them who we are," Aunt Patricia said, tapping her fingernail against a copy of the invitation mock-up. "Let's not look like we just crawled out of the bargain bin." Nuala didn't say anything. She'd stopped saying much at all, from the moment Ethan handed her a sleek black credit card and told her, get what you truly want. She had imagined a modest, heartwarming wedding, a garden ceremony in a small field just outside Burlington, a string quartet playing Harvest Moon, rows of wooden chairs, white roses, handmade candles. But every detail she chose became a battleground. Her mother dismissed the venue as too plain. Jessica rolled her eyes at the simple floral arrangements. "This looks like a PTA fundraiser." Patricia scoffed when Nyla chose local caterers. "You're marrying into real money. Serve something people can't pronounce." Nyla found herself arguing over things she never cared about before. Chair covers, monogrammed napkins, designer heels. They wanted gold-accented everything. They wanted lobster tails and champagne towers. They wanted drama, extravagance proof, perhaps, that the Bennets had arrived. At first, Nyla pushed back. Then she began to retreat. "I just want something intimate," she said one evening, voice trembling slightly. Her mother gave her a look, half pity, half disdain. "Sweetheart, you have to think beyond yourself now. This isn't just about you." Jessica chimed in with a sharp smirk. "You don't want people thinking Ethan married a small-town charity case." It stung, more than she let on. Even Ethan noticed her shrinking presence. "You're quiet," he said one evening, handing her a cup of tea as she curled up on the couch. She shrugged. "Just tired. You don't have to let them plan your wedding." "Neela," she looked down at the mug. "They say it's our family's one chance to be seen, to be more than what she didn't answer, because deep down she knew. Her family didn't just want a celebration. They wanted redemption for years of financial struggle, invisible social standing, and dreams that never came true. And they were willing to hijack hers to get it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Neela presented the final guest list. She and Ethan had carefully narrowed it down to 50 people, close friends, co-workers, a few relatives they genuinely cared about. As she laid the list on the table, her mother's brow furrowed. "How many of our friends are invited?" Neela blinked. "Well, the seating's limited, and we already Linda cut her off. Limited Nyla. This is the event of the year." "You're being selfish." The word hit like a slap. Selfish for wanting her wedding to reflect her heart, not their hunger for validation. She looked at their faces, Linda's tight smile, Jessica's judgmental eyes, Patricia's cold composure, and something inside her shifted. It wasn't just disagreement anymore. It was entitlement, possession, an ugly truth. They weren't celebrating her. They were using her that night. Neela sat alone in the bathtub, knees pulled to her chest, listening to the soft drip of the faucet. Her skin prickled with goosebumps, but it wasn't the cold. It was grief, not over a lost dream, but over a lost illusion. Her entire life, she had bent herself to fit inside the narrow walls of her family's expectations. She had learned to stay small, to apologize for wanting more, to feel guilt for being different. But now she was realizing the most painful truth of all. They didn't want her happy. They wanted her compliant. At the next dress fitting, the seamstress tugged gently at the hem of her ivory gown. Neela smiled politely, trying to focus on the delicate lace, the subtle sparkle near the neckline. Then she heard Patricia whisper behind her, "It's still too plain. Rich brides wear Vera Wang, not vintage knockoffs." Jessica snorted. "Maybe that's the point. Don't want to raise expectations too high." Neela's hands balled into fists. She turned around slowly. You know what she said, her voice quiet but sharp. They looked up, surprised. "I'm marrying a man who treats me like I'm enough just as I am. I don't need to perform for you." Linda raised an eyebrow. "We're just trying to help you fit into his world. Honey, you don't want to embarrass him. That was the breaking point." Neela stood still for a long moment, then walked out of the boutique without another word. Later that evening, Ethan found her standing barefoot in their backyard, staring at the darkened sky. "Talk to me," he said, softly. She didn't turn around. "I think they hate me," she whispered. "Not because I did something wrong, but because I finally did something right. Something good, and they couldn't control it." Ethan stepped closer. "You don't have to let them poison this." Neela wiped her cheek. "What if I already have?" He gently turned her to face him. "You're not responsible for their bitterness. Neela, you didn't break them. They came broken." Her lip trembled. "But they're my family." "I know," he said. "But you get to choose what kind of family you build from here." In the quiet that followed, Neela felt the first flicker of resolve, but she didn't yet know that her moment of awakening had come too late. Because her family had already set something in motion, something deeper, colder than criticism or pressure. They weren't just sabotaging a wedding. They were preparing to destroy her joy completely. The morning light crept in soft and golden, the way it does only a few times a year on the kind of day meant for beginnings. For most brides, it would have been perfect. Birds chirping outside the window, dew still clinging to the grass, a gentle breeze stirring the sheer curtains. Nyla Bennett sat on the edge of her bed, wrapped in a robe, staring at the garment bag that held her wedding dress. Today was the day she had dreamed of since she was a child, hiding under old curtains, pretending to be a bride. The day she thought would rewrite every harsh word, every cold silence, every moment of self-doubt. She didn't know that within hours her dream would unravel at the seams slowly, and then, all at once. Her family was supposed to arrive at 8 Hum to help her get ready, hair and makeup at 9 first, photographer at 10:00, ceremony at 2:00 sharp in the garden outside Ethan's estate. Everything had been planned down to the minute, but by 8:30 no one had shown up. Nayla called her mother, no answer. She called again, straight to voicemail, on the third try. Linda picked up, her voice oddly calm. "Oh, we're just running a bit late. Honey, you know how traffic is." Neela stared at the phone. There was no traffic in their small town, none that could explain a 45-minute delay. But she pushed the worry down. Not today. Please, not today. They arrived at 9:45. Jessica, Patricia, and Linda filed in with forced smiles and flat greetings. Their makeup was already done, their clothes impeccable. They barely looked at Neela. "Sorry we're late," Jessica said, though her tone made it clear she wasn't sorry at all. Neela tried to shake off the unease. She could still salvage the mood, still make this day her own. Then her phone rang. It was Monica, her hairstylist. "Neela, I'm so sorry. I can't make it. My sister had a medical emergency. I have to leave town." Neela blinked. "But, Monica, it's my—" The line went dead. 5 minutes later, The makeup artist called with a similar excuse. Then the florist, then the bakery. One by one, the pillars of her wedding crumbled. She stood in the hallway, clutching her phone, disbelief turning into dread. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Her mother looked up from her coffee. "Weird. Huh, all these coincidences." But her eyes didn't match her tone. They were cold, knowing. That was the first moment Nyla truly understood something terrible. This wasn't bad luck. This was planned. She ran to the guest room closet, heart pounding. Her dress was there. She exhaled in relief and reached for it. Then she froze. There, across the front of the bodice, was a long, dark red stain. Wine, the kind her aunt always drank. The hem was torn in 3 places. The dress was ruined. Nyla dropped to her knees, the gown crumpling in her lap like the last fragile piece of a life she'd tried to build. "How could this?" she choked. Jessica appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "Accidents happen," she said, her voice syrupy and sharp. "Maybe this is a sign you're in over your head." Her mother stepped behind her, shaking her head sadly. But Nyla saw the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. "Honey," Linda said softly, "maybe it's better to call this whole thing off. Save yourself the embarrassment." The room spun. Nyla clutched the torn fabric, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her chest burned, not from anger, but from heartbreak. They had done this. Her own family, the people who were supposed to love her, protect her, had destroyed the most important day of her life. Why? Because she dared to be happy. Because she dared to choose something they didn't approve of. Because she chose herself. She sat there, shaking, tears streaming silently down her face. The girl who always smiled politely, who never raised her voice, who spent her life trying to be good, that girl was breaking. That girl was done. Then she heard it. His voice, Nyla's sweetheart. "Where are you, Ethan?" The only person in the world who had ever made her feel like more than enough. She couldn't face him, couldn't bear to tell him everything had fallen apart, that the wedding was ruined, that she was ruined. He stepped into the room and froze when he saw her sitting on the floor, holding the dress, surrounded by tension so thick it felt like a weight. His expression shifted confusion, then realization, then something steely and sharp, not rage, but precision. He knelt beside her, pulled her close, and let her sob into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "They ruined everything. I let them ruin everything." Ethan gently pulled back and cupped her face. "Nyla," he said quietly. "I know." She blinked. "You? What?" He exhaled. "I've known for weeks. I hired a private investigator. I overheard Patricia talking to Jessica about sabotaging the guest list. Something didn't sit right. I needed to be sure." She stared at him, stunned. "And you didn't tell me I couldn't," he said gently. "You wouldn't have believed me. You'd have made excuses for them. You needed to see it. And I needed to be ready." He stood and pulled out his phone, made a single call. "It's time." Minutes later, Nyla heard them trucks pulling into the driveway. Voices, footsteps. She followed Ethan to the window. A crew of stylists, decorators, florists, and photographers flooded into the yard like a well-oiled army. "Plan B," Ethan said softly. "I had backups for everything." She turned to him, stunned. Why would you do all this? He smiled, wrapping his arms around her, because you still deserve your day. Nyla looked down at the stained dress in her arms. No, she said, her voice steady. I want a different dress, one that isn't theirs, one that feels like me. Ethan nodded. Already handled. And just like that, the day turned again toward something real. Outside, the morning had taken on a new rhythm, where silence once clung like fog. Now came the sounds of motion of life. Car doors closing, boxes being carried, voices calling directions with calm efficiency. From the upstairs window, Nayla Bennett watched her front yard transform. Florists unfurled bundles of white roses and eucalyptus across trellises. Decorators strung delicate fairy lights between trees. A hairstylist rolled in a silver case like it held priceless treasure. In the distance, a string quartet began tuning their instruments beneath a linen tent. She turned away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed, her legs dangling, her heart somewhere between disbelief and surrender. This was really happening. Not the wedding she had planned, not the wedding her family had tried to commandeer, but something else, something unexpected, something better. Ethan knocked softly before entering. In his hands, he held a garment bag. He didn't speak, just offered it to her like a peace offering, or maybe a promise. She stood, hesitated, and unzipped it. Inside was a gown unlike anything she'd ever dared imagine for herself. Ivory silk, gentle lace along the sleeves, and a simple ribbon around the waist. Elegant, classic, soft as a whisper, strong as a vow. Her breath caught in her throat. I asked a designer friend to make a backup, Ethan said, just in case. She traced the embroidery at the collar. It's beautiful. You're beautiful, he replied without hesitation. And this time, she didn't flinch, didn't protest. She just nodded, because maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to believe it. An hour later, she sat in front of a mirror as a stylist gently curled her hair, working with care and grace. Another artist applied soft strokes of color to her cheeks, her lips, her eyelids. They didn't rush, they didn't gossip. They simply worked with reverence, as if honoring something delicate and sacred. One of them, a young woman named Elise, smiled at her reflection and said, "You have the kind of face that tells a story." Neela blinked. "What kind of story?" Elise shrugged, "One that ends with a woman finally choosing herself." The words clung to her chest long after Elise turned away. Downstairs, her family stood awkwardly in the foyer, watching the transformation unfold. Men in suits carried floral arrangements past them. Servers moved efficiently in and out of the kitchen. A photographer adjusted her lens and ignored their presence entirely. Patricia whispered something sharp under her breath. Jessica checked her phone with exaggerated disinterest. Linda's face was unreadable. Her fingers clutched tightly around a lukewarm cup of coffee. Then Ethan entered. He was calm, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Ladies," he said, voice level, "I think it's time for you to leave." Linda opened her mouth. "Ethan, I think there's been some sort of—" "No," he interrupted, holding up a hand. "No more pretending. You didn't come here to celebrate. You came to destroy." Jessica scoffed. "You can't just throw us out. We're her family." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Family," he said, "doesn't sabotage the people they claim to love." Two security guards appeared silently behind him, polite but firm. Patricia gave one final snort of contempt. "This won't last. Men like you don't stay with girls like her." Ethan didn't even blink. "Fortunately, she's not a girl. She's a woman, and I intend to spend the rest of my life honoring her." He turned, and the guards guided them out without incident. The door clicked shut behind them. Upstairs, Nila sat in silence, unaware of what had just happened below. She stared at her reflection. Not the young woman who used to apologize for existing, not the little girl who tried to earn love by shrinking herself. Someone else now looked back, not perfect, but free. When she finally walked down the stairs, everyone paused. Conversations stopped. Music softened. Nila moved slowly, carefully, wearing the dress Ethan had saved just for her. Ethan met her at the bottom step, his expression a blend of awe and something older, something like devotion. He offered his arm. She took it. They stepped outside into a backyard that no longer resembled a backyard at all. It looked like a garden in a dream string, lights glowing gently, petals scattered like confetti, chairs arranged in quiet symmetry beneath the Vermont sky. Only 20 guests sat waiting. Friends, colleagues, the barista who'd trained Nila on her first day, Ethan's business partner and his wife. People who smiled not with envy, but with joy. There were no mothers whispering critiques, no sisters with narrowed eyes. Just love. The ceremony began. A hush fell as the officiant cleared her throat. But before she spoke, Ethan turned to Nila. "Can I say something?" he asked. The officiant nodded. He took both of Nila's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "You've taught me," he said, "that real wealth isn't measured in accounts or property. It's in kindness. It's in knowing how to love and how to let yourself be loved." Nila's eyes shimmered. "Today," he continued, "you stood tall after being pushed down. You opened your heart even after it had been broken. You didn't just survive today. You claimed it. I vow to never let you forget how extraordinary that is." The guests were silent, breath held. Nayla smiled, tears tracing clean lines down her cheeks. Then it was her turn. Her voice, though soft, carried. "Ethan," she began, "you didn't just save this day. You saved me from believing I had to earn love. You showed me I was already worthy. And today, I don't just marry you, I marry the life we'll choose together, one built on grace and truth and peace." They kissed under the arch of flowers, with fairy lights twinkling above, and a breeze gently lifting the hem of her gown. And in that moment, Nila didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like a bride, like a woman who had finally chosen joy on her own terms. The ceremony melted into the soft glow of late afternoon. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting golden beams through the swaying branches. The music shifted, no longer formal, but easy and warm, like something you'd hear drifting through a kitchen window on a Sunday morning. Nila Bennett stood at the edge of it all, barefoot for a moment, toes curled into the grass. Her gown flowed softly around her legs, no longer a costume she had to fit into, but a garment that fit her. She didn't rush to rejoin the party. She wanted to take it all in. The laughter floating from the tables, the clink of glasses, the hum of voices that felt like comfort instead of judgment. The people here weren't trying to impress anyone. They weren't waiting for her to fail. They were here because they chose to be. The reception wasn't grand. There were no ice sculptures or fireworks, but there was a long wooden table under strings of glowing lights, decorated with wildflowers and linen runners, plates of roasted vegetables, lemon chicken, and fresh bread passed from hand to hand. At one end, the barista who used to cover Nayla's shifts shared a toast about the first time Nayla had accidentally served a cappuccino to a customer who ordered black coffee. At the other, Ethan's best friend joked about how Ethan once wore two mismatched shoes to a board meeting because he was too distracted thinking about a certain coffee shop girl. Everyone laughed, but Nayla, she felt something deeper. She felt seen. Later that evening, she slipped into the house for a quiet moment alone. In the hallway mirror, her reflection stared back, flushed, smiling, peaceful. For the first time, she didn't see the girl who used to second-guess every choice. She didn't see a woman shaped by scarcity or rejection. She saw someone full, enough, whole. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "Hey, wife." Ethan, she turned, and he was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Still surreal," she said softly. He walked toward her. "You know, when I first walked into that coffee shop, I was just looking for caffeine." She chuckled. "And instead, you got a mess with chipped nail polish and a bad attitude." "No," he said, wrapping his arms around her, "I got everything I didn't know I needed." Back outside, their first dance began. No stage, no spotlight, just a wooden platform under the trees and an old record playing Louis Armstrong. Nayla rested her head on Ethan's chest, and they swayed gently. Not for show, not for photos, just for each other. Around them, the people who mattered, the ones who showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to watch with soft smiles and teary eyes. Ethan's mentor clinked his glass and raised it high. "To choosing joy," he said, "to choosing your people. Blood doesn't make a family. Loyalty does." Everyone raised their glasses. Nayla blinked back tears. This wasn't just her wedding. This was her arrival. The evening wore on with stories, dancing, and quiet conversation. Someone passed out slices of vanilla cake with lemon frosting. The little flower girl fell asleep under the table, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The violinist played one last song before packing up, his eyes misty as he waved goodbye. And Nayla, she stood with Ethan under the fairy lights, arms around each other's waists, not speaking, just feeling. A soft peace settled over her chest, not the explosive kind, the kind that comes after surviving something hard, the kind you have to earn. As the last guests trickled out and the candles flickered low, Nayla walked through the yard one final time. She touched the chairs, the tablecloths, the small box of handwritten notes from friends. Every detail was imperfectly perfect, and it was hers. No one had stolen this from her. She'd claimed it back, inside. She curled up on the couch beside Ethan, both still in their wedding clothes. She kicked off her shoes and leaned against him. He kissed her hair. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." There was a long pause. Then Nayla whispered, "You know what's wild? What this is the first time I've ever had a day that didn't feel like I owed someone something." Ethan pulled her close. "That's how it should be, and it won't be the last." That night, as they lay together beneath a quilt sewn by Ethan's grandmother, Nayla stared at the ceiling and thought about everything she'd lost, and everything she'd gained. She thought about silence that used to feel like punishment, but now felt like peace. She thought about love that once felt conditional, but now felt like home. She thought about the girl who used to shrink herself to fit into everyone else's world. And she smiled, because that girl had grown wings. 6 months had passed. The autumn air had turned crisp in Vermont, painting the trees in fire-colored leaves. The world outside Nyla Bennett's window shimmered in golds and reds. But the world inside her, it was calm, steady, quiet, in a way that felt earned. She stood at the kitchen sink of the home she now shared with Ethan Whitmore. It wasn't a mansion or a high-rise penthouse. It was a restored farmhouse on the edge of town, with creaky floorboards and a porch that faced the sunrise, a place that felt like theirs. She sipped her coffee, still black, still strong, and stared out at the yard where she'd once said, "I do under fairy lights and white roses." A single thought stirred gently in her chest. I'm not who I used to be. There were moments when the past still knocked. A forwarded email from an old cousin, a voicemail from her mother, brief and businesslike, a chance sighting of Jessica at the grocery store, smirking from behind her shopping cart as if nothing had happened. But those moments no longer crushed her. They passed through her like clouds over water, felt but not held, because Nyla had learned that letting go didn't always come with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it came in the form of not answering. Sometimes in the form of living well, not out of spite, but out of healing. One evening, Ethan found her curled up on the couch, reading a book. He sat beside her, ran a thumb along her wrist, and asked, "Do you miss them?" She thought for a long time before answering. "I miss the idea of them," she said. "The version of them I hoped they could be." Ethan nodded. He understood. They weren't capable of loving me in the way I needed. She continued, "But I don't hate them. I just finally stopped needing their approval." She smiled, more to herself than to him, and in the space they left behind, something better grew. Their days became simple, shared breakfasts, long walks, quiet evenings on the porch swing. Nyla went back to the coffee shop part-time, not because she had to, but because she loved the rhythm of it. She started sketching again, something she hadn't done since college. She even planted lilacs in the garden, remembering how Ethan once brought her that single sprig wrapped in a napkin. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was true. And in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, Nyla would think back to the girl she used to be, the girl who believed she had to earn love by being small, the girl who thought loyalty meant accepting pain, the girl who measured her worth by her family's moods, and she'd whisper, "You made it." Not long after, she received a letter. It was from Patricia, a short, sharp note, apologizing if she had hurt her, though things got out of hand. No mention of the dress, or the sabotage, or the looks that cut deeper than knives. Nyla read it once, then folded it, placed it in a drawer, and moved on. Closure, she had come to learn, was not something others gave you. It was something you created for yourself. At Thanksgiving, she hosted a dinner not for the family she came from, but the one she had built. The coffee shop crew, Ethan's old friend from college, a single mom from down the street. The table was mismatched. The stuffing slightly burned, and someone spilled cider on the rug. It was perfect. Between courses, someone asked, "Do you ever hear from your old family?" Neela didn't flinch. "Not really," she said, "and I'm okay with that." She smiled, lifted her glass, and added, "Sometimes the greatest gift is losing the people who were never really with you to begin with." The room went quiet, not from discomfort, but from resonance. Heads nodded, glasses clinked. Everyone understood. Later that night, after the guests had left and the dishes were done, Neela stepped onto the porch and breathed in the cool night air. The stars blinked above her. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. She thought of the wedding day, of sitting on the floor, ruined dress in her lap, her heart in pieces. She thought of Ethan's hand on hers, of fairy lights and quiet vows, of dancing barefoot under the stars. And then she thought of all the women like her, women who had been told they were too little, too plain, too not enough, women who had bent themselves to fit into spaces that never honored their shape, women who believed that love meant sacrifice and family meant endurance. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You don't have to stay small, because if this story meant anything, if it offered anything, it was this: you get to choose. You get to choose love that heals instead of hurts. You get to choose peace over performance. You get to choose your people, not based on blood, but on belonging. And most of all, you get to choose you." The wind picked up, and Nayla Bennett, once a simple woman behind a coffee counter, now stood quietly strong on her porch, her life her own, and for the first time in her life, she was completely, unapologetically free. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who share our last name. This story reminds us that family is not defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and presence. Neela's journey teaches a quiet but powerful truth. It's never too late to choose peace over performance, truth over tradition, and love over loyalty that hurts. For many of us, especially those in the later chapters of life, this truth can feel both familiar and freeing. Maybe you've spent years holding on to roles that were never yours to play. Maybe you've been made to feel small in the name of keeping the peace. But what if the peace you've been keeping has cost you your voice like Neela? We all deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate our worth, not question it. And sometimes healing begins not with confrontation, but with release. You are not too old to start again. You are not too late to choose differently. Let this story be your quiet permission to let go of what no longer serves you and to embrace the life and the love that truly does. Thank you for sharing your time and heart with us today. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply reminded you that love, real love, still matters, we'd be honored if you'd show your support. Please like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Your voice helps us reach others who may need this message too. And together, we can keep bringing more light to the places that need it most. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and keep believing in better.